When a homeowner is selling a single-family residence, a duplex, a triplex, fourplex, a condominium, or even a mobile home, they are required by law to provide the buyer with certain statutory disclosures for the buyer's review. Now, some of those disclosures are the transfer disclosure statement, the natural hazard disclosure statement, just to name a few. And as a listing agent and buyer's agent that has seen the paperwork completed by both sides, it is quite disappointing to know or to see that most real estate agents simply don't understand how to properly have these forms processed and completed. So the purpose of this video is to help you understand the importance behind the transfer disclosure statement in specific and how to properly have it processed. I am Nicolas Romo, a real estate broker for Realty Connection Group, and my goal is to have my agents understand how to properly complete and process all of the paperwork involved. So here we are on page 7 of the residential purchase agreement. I am under section number 11A1. And here it says, seller shall, within the time specified in paragraph 3 and 1, that time period is 7 days, unless agreed upon differently by both the buyer and the seller. Deliver to buyer unless exempt. Somebody who would be exempt from delivering a transfer disclosure statement would be somebody such as the bank that forecloses on a property. They wouldn't have to complete some of these disclosures. Instead, they would just complete the ESD or the exempt seller disclosure. So fully completed disclosures or notices required by the civil code here, and it just basically goes on to explain a little bit more about the disclosures, and it names a few more disclosures here. So what I want to point out specifically in this paragraph is that they're statutory disclosures. That means they are required by law, and then we have to fully complete them. Once I open up a transfer disclosure statement right now, I'll show you some of the mistakes that agents commit all the time when they process these forms. All right, let's get started. Let's go on to, let's open the transfer disclosure statement. The Real Estate Transfer Disclosure Statement, California Civil Code 1102. Anytime you see any form that has this, like a civil code underneath the title of the form, that means that it's required by law. You have to have that form completed and processed. Who completes a real estate transfer disclosure statement? Great question. The real estate transfer disclosure statement is completed by the seller. At least all the questions are answered by the seller. You, as the listing agent, will not answer the questions for the seller. You have to have the seller complete this, him or herself. One of the first mistakes that I see that happens quite a bit is that people leave this section blank right here where the date goes. This statement is a disclosure of the condition of the above described property in compliance with section 1102 of the Civil Code as of date. And so the date that the seller is completing this form is the date that goes here. Don't leave this blank. If your seller doesn't fill it out, have them fill it out, have them put in the date here, or ask them for permission to allow you to put the date in there for them. Write it by hand, the date that they completed the form. These 3 boxes, they got to check off one of these. Normally people just check off the third one, no substituted disclosures for this transfer. Then the next question is, the seller occupying the property? Yes or no? Seller is, check off the first box. Seller is not, check off this box. If the seller does not check off one of these boxes, This means that the form is incomplete. This form, ladies and gentlemen, has a 3-day rescission period. That means that after you submit this form to the buyer, they have 3 days to cancel for any reason if given to them in person, and 5 days to cancel if given to the by email or after receiving it in the mail. Make sure that the seller completes and answers all the questions and checks off all the appropriate boxes. Right here where it says exhaust fans, 2020 volt wiring in fireplaces, this section is left blank in most TDSs that I see. If the seller is unaware or does not know something about the property, all they have to put is unknown or do not know, anything like that. Don't leave it blank. Exhaust fans in bathrooms, 2020 volt wiring in, don't know. Fireplaces in, none. Roof type, shingles. Age of the roof, 25 years approximately. And then a highlight all the questions that need to be answered. Are there, to the best of your seller's knowledge, any of the above that are not in operating condition? Yes or no? If you leave it blank, it is incomplete. And then you go through the form, answering all the questions, and then completing explanations if necessary, where appropriate. More questions. All of these questions have to be answered, and an explanation provided if you answered yes to any one of them. This section here is for the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Under statutory law, we are also required to provide, or conduct, I should say, a competent visual inspection of the property. Just whatever we can see without moving anything, we report. So if you see something, you see a floor that's cracked, tiles cracked, you see a hole in the wall, you report what you see, and the transfer disclosure statement can be used to report such items. So you would have to click on one of these boxes. In this case, agent notes the following items. As a real estate broker, I require my agents to click on and check off the first box, which says see attached agent visual inspection disclosure form, the AVID form. Once you do this, you don't have to complete this anymore. Right here, these lines, this space, you don't have to put anything in here, because the agent visual inspection disclosure is a better form to report whatever it is that you find. And what we're looking for when we're doing our visual inspection are defects, are material items that would negatively impact the value or the desirability of the property by the buyer. So we have to check off this box, sign it, and then complete the AVID. Here, same thing for the buyer's agent. When you receive this form from the listing side, you have to check off the box, sign it, date it, complete the AVID, and you're done. It's just one more form that I always submit with the transfer disclosure statement, and that is the seller property questionnaire. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just want to read just a couple things. All sellers of California real property are required to provide various disclosures either by contract or by statute or case law. Thorough disclosures help to reduce disputes, facilitate a smooth sales transaction. So thorough means fully completed, properly completed and processed. And then it just gives the buyer and the seller some tips here in these two number 2 and 3. And then all the questions should be answered on the right side, answered by the seller. Make sure thorough. And then buyer and seller sign. And that, along with the agent visual inspection disclosure, is submitted to the buyer's agent, and the statutory requirement is complete. Just remember that upon receipt of these disclosures by the buyer's agent, the buyer has a 3-day rescission period to cancel if given to them in person, or 5 days if mailed to them or given to them via email. And the last piece of information that I want to share with you is that as the listing agent, it is your duty to look after the best interests of your seller. That means that you have to process all the paperwork as quickly as possible. All of the statutory disclosures, the TDS, the NHD, and you may have to provide the fire hazard disclosure and other forms. You have to do so within 7 days, the first week. Have them filled out, have them completed properly, and submit it to the buyer's agent. The longer you wait, the more time that you're giving the buyer to be able to cancel the transaction. For example, if you, as a listing agent, drop the ball and you provide your seller with the TDS and some of these other disclosures for them to sign and complete, say 17 days into the transaction. Here you go, Mr. Seller. Here are the transfer disclosure statement and other forms that you have to complete. They return it to you on day 20th, 3 days later after you give it to them. Surprisingly, they're fully completed. You fill out your agent visual inspection section and the Avid form. Everything's good to go. You hand it over to the buyer. The buyer has until the 23rd. They have 3 days to be able to cancel the transaction for no reason. They don't have to give you a reason. They can just say, sorry, I'm going to exercise my 3-day rescission period. We're out. So if they had another underlying reason for cancellation that they were struggling to bring to your attention, now they don't have to bring it to your attention. All they have to do is say, oh, thank you for the transfer disclosure statement. I'm exercising my right to cancel within the first 3 days. We're out. So what did you just do for your seller? You just basically made them lose 3 weeks. So the sooner that you can provide your seller with these forms, the better. As a buyer's agent, on the other hand, if the listing site is not providing you with these disclosures in a timely manner, it is probably in your best interest just to hold off and use it to your advantage or to your buyer's advantage. Now, I'm not giving you that as legal advice, so please don't take it as such, but it's just, these little, I guess, nuances and details and specifics of how the transactions should unfold, but don't, that can either cause hardship for your seller or your buyer. So be careful, whatever side you're representing, and just do everything correctly and as thorough as possible with all of the paperwork. Any documents that are delivered to you, make sure you read them. Make sure you check for areas that are incomplete that the listing agent or the buyer's agent should complete. Make sure that all the signatures and initials are in place, that the forms are dated. The more thorough that you are as a real estate agent, the better you're going to be at your craft and the more business that you're going to have, because knowing the paperwork and the rules and the laws behind it is going to help you and save you a lot of headache. Now with that, thank you for your time. I appreciate you watching.